Where Loyalties Lie. Honor Guard. Chapter 7. Guilt. By Loyalliar. Shining Armor was ushered by the palace servants into the upper dining room. His memories of the palace were still a soldier on's cold, desperate words and Celestia's fury. The dark wood and narrow east-facing windows left the palace shadowed, cold, and claustrophobic. The ponies within didn't help. There were 8 ponies by his quick count and 10 chairs. They were all watching him, quietly. He moved onto the only acceptable open seat, halfway down the left side of the table. As he approached, the princess spoke up. "That is not your seat, Captain." Her horn, still slender and lethally pointed despite her change in stature, gestured toward the foot of the table. There, he found a padded silver throne, emblazoned with Luna's coat of arms. "Princess, I don't think—" "Do not think I intend for you to take her place, Shining Armor." Celestia's gaze, sharpened to a soul-cutting blade, swept across the room, taking each face in turn. "This place is left empty to remember an absent member of the stable." A tilt of her head was enough to move him towards Luna's seat. He acquiesced only to get the lingering gazes of the nobles off his back. Even when he placed himself in the cold, lonely throne, he could feel the fur of his coat standing on end beneath his armor. It would do him little good in the dark room, where the weapons of choice were bladed words and twisted ideas. When he finally settled, the eyes of the group turned as one to the pony on Celestia's right. "I, part of the League, Count Tottenham and Lord Chancellor of the Stable of Nobles, call this meeting of the Stable of Nobles to order," boomed an overstated, grating voice. It came from a unicorn whose size would have been more imposing were it not for the rolls of weight that covered his unending neck. He placed an unbearably prideful hoof on the center of his chest and opened his mouth to speak again. Out came a burgeoning cough that put flinches on the faces of those opposite him. Another followed, then a third, and when the hacking finally ceased, the heavy unicorn's vibrant purple jacket was stained with sweat. He took almost no time in catching his breath, however, and his unnecessary tone continued without further incident. "Let all those present state their names and be titles for the benefit of their peers." Having finished this introduction, Count Wig lowered himself down onto his flank again, on his seat onto a painful creak. When his girth finally settled, he gestured with his horn to the stallion sitting on his left. A scruffy-looking unicorn mare with half-moon glasses settled on her nose rose up in her seat. A billowing rust-red dress tumbled from its place, folded onto her back into countless ribbons that covered her frame like a waterfall. "Red Warden, Keeper of the West and Duchess of San Palmonio." Then came an old Pegasus, wearing a blue necktie over a shirt. "Silver Lining, representative of the Council of Cloudstale." His words were followed by a snort from somewhere within the room. The old pony only seemed to have not noticed beneath his thick mustache, as his wings were pressed against their seat. The next pony, sitting immediately on Shining's right, was one he knew all too well. "I am Prince Blueblood, defender of the esteemed domain of Canterlot." The brute had called himself a guardian had, in fact, been a royal guard once, though Shining knew all too well that the service was yet another of his dishonest attempts to bring glory to himself and his family. His single term of service had been grudgingly given in exchange for the title he put forward, rather than for any actual feelings of duty or service. Eyes swirled swiftly around the room, but Shining Armor was ready. He rose up from the ill-fitting throne and placed a gold-shod hoof over the amethyst armor on his chest. "I—" "Not now, Captain," Celestia corrected. The reprimand was short and businesslike, and told Shining that some inane rule gave him no right to speak his name. He was perhaps a bit embarrassed, though the pumping of his blood of his determination more easily overrode the emotion. The next mare who rose up to speak bore the curious coloration of a half-breed. Unlike the Cloudstale Pegasus, her words had not even begun to flow when the untraceable sound of disgust was offered to the room. She ignored the clearly practiced pride as she began to speak. "I am Oromo Hudstone, and I speak for the biker. The quiet had left behind as was quickly filled by another voice, pointedly shrewd in every coronation. Sorvanzo Esquivizo, you participate the battaglia. The lead unicorn, whose fat could never be mistaken for anything else, powdered wig glared at him. He responded with a blunt groan. I, Prince Savanzo Abitali, though you all ought to know that. Thank you, Prince. Powderwig muttered before gesturing to the final noble. Shining had come to expect a little puffing up from the alicorn, and that was precisely what he heard. By birth, I am simply Watsford I, but the ponies of my care have chosen me as Premier and Tsar of Stalingrad. The Tsar wasn't a particularly tall stallion, and he certainly lacked anything resembling a real muscle, but the genuine tone of his voice, and the gentle gauntness of his face, and the length of his particularly sharp horn, gave him an air of height, towering over all his peers in the room. Only Celestia remained above him, her pink mane and shrunken form still set aside over all others by virtue of her divinity. Before Shining Armor could wander about the alicorn any longer, his attention was again stolen by the heavy-set leader of the table, whose unmistakably boring tone made the guards pony want to put his face down on the priceless enemy table and take a nap. The stable recognizes Duchess Warden, Representative Lining, Prince Brewblood, Governess General Hotstone, Prince Savanzo, and Baron. Shining was caught unprepared by the sudden response. Anger flashed across Watchful Eye's face, and the alicorn's slender hoofs smashed against the polished tabletop with unforgiving force. In response, the unicorn didn't miss a beat. Forgive me. Sauced I. Appeased, Watchful Eyes removed the offending limb and returned to his silence. Powdered Wig noted and continued his seemingly unending speech. We regret that due to illness, Marquis Couture Applance is unable to attend. He gestured to the empty seat Shining had moved toward on entering the room. The stable now recognizes its honored guests. First and truly foremost, we recognize Her Solar Majesty, the immortal Princess Celestia. Shining couldn't help but notice as the words were spoken, Celestia's face took on something like irritation. And finally, the stable recognizes Shining Armor of the Royal Guard. A long pause followed, as the nobles all stared at him, silently judging. When the unspoken trial was finally over, what seemed like hours later, Powderwig lifted his voice again. We are here to discuss a matter of grave importance to the body of Equestria, and how it will affect our subjects. At this time, I yield the floor to Princess Celestia. Thank you, Lord Chancellor, Celestia offered with a smile, before settling forward to address the 7 nobles in attendance. I am not sure what you have heard, so I will simply tell you the truth. 3 days ago, a unicorn mare called Masquerade attempted to assassinate my sister. Gasps and gaping mouths made it perfectly clear which of the noble ponies already knew the reality of the situation, and which did not. The former made up nearly all the ponies present, and Shining Armor was glad to count Blue Blood amongst their number. On the other hoof, the ruler of the meeting, the ruler of Stalingrad, and the father of Princess Cadence all held straight faces. Given his discussions with both Savanzo and Cadence, it wasn't hard to guess where he had learned of the plot. The other 2 were less obvious. Regardless, the 3 maintained stony faces, likely afraid that some show of emotion would offend Celestia. The true ruler of the group continued after a simple raising of her hoof to silence the room. Rainbow Dash, who you may remember as the bearer of loyalty, was able to prevent this attack, but a poison still entered my sister's body. Celestia's tone was dispassionate and carried an undercurrent of iron, far from the raw emotion that Shining had experienced 2 days earlier. As we speak, Luna continues to lie comatose in the palace infirmary. At the mention of Rainbow's name, Shining caught a quick glance of some reaction on the face of Silver Lining, the sole Pegasus among the group. What the older stallion thought, he kept hidden among tight lips and an implacable face. His reaction was not one which received the rest of the group's attentions. "What can I do for you, princess?" The words escaped the battalion's princess so quickly that Shining Armor couldn't help but believe that he had been waiting to ask him. Such preparation, obsession with his appearance, certainly fit his father-in-law's tendencies, and he slowly realized that Servanzo might have been trying to build sympathy for a later, ill-advised request. Yes, your majesty. How could we be of service? Justice Warden followed, though with not quite the same emphasis that her predecessor had used. Calm, please, Celestia requested. The first way you can assist me is to calm yourselves and think. Nessie waited for what most men seemed to be her only a drop in the ocean of endless lifetimes. When all was silent, Aura's light slowly lifted from approaching sunset stuck in the windows. She deigned to speak again. In order to prevent our current issue from spilling out of hand, I ask you to seal your borders. Prince Servanzo piped up again with his overpowering, near-shouting voice. Princess, I understand the urgency of this matter, but that does not risk sending the wrong message to our neighbors, not to mention loss of trade! I can deal with what other political backlash we may face, but those borders are not the ones I am most concerned with. Her gaze swept slowly over the table, meeting every pair of eyes in turn as she had at Shining Armor's seating. I mean for your jurisdictions to close one another. Her words were met with gasps and shock, but they did not stop or even slow. Canterlot will reimburse the loss of trade, but until we deal with this issue, this is the only way we can continue both the assassin and knowledge of her plot. The ponies at the table started to all talk at once, and though her words, Shining found himself unable to make out even a single thought. Celestia waited for a few moments, but when the sound showed no signs of relenting, she raised a single hoof and was nearly awarded silence. Prince Blueblood alone found himself unable to simply shut his mouth. Auntie, you have to be joking. We can't afford to replace Equestria's trade at the pocket, and I have no intention of seeing my treasury disappear overnight. Celestia was ready to offer a calm response, but her words were too slow to beat Shining Armor's reaction. The stallion's tone had incensed him, but built upon a dozen other tiny factors into a solid shout. He slammed his hoof onto the table, just as watchful eye had, hard enough to send the rest of the room's nobles jumping. You're worried about Blue Blood money? You're worried about money, Blue Blood? Are you honestly more concerned with staying rich than you are with the princess's life? Prince Blueblood rose to the accusation, and the two towering unicorn stallions found themselves glaring eye to eye as they shouted at one another. Listen to me, Commoner! I don't... Blueblood found himself unable to outshout the infuriated guard's pony. Shining's fury came in three parts. His burning focus on Luna's salvation, and vengeance for Markdown. His anger at the detestable greed of the stallion, and his personal hatred for Blueblood himself. Together, they gave the captain a shouting force to be reckoned with. How much is Princess Luna's life worth to you then, Prince? How many bits would you spend to save her? Blueblood answered with a surprising ferocity, lifting his own voice to match the stallion he saw as his lesser. You clearly have no idea what you're talking about, Armor, so allow me to explain myself. I'm not interested in keeping the money for myself. My private holdings are more than enough to satisfy me. The treasury, however, is necessary for Equestria to function. I admit that Auntie's plan might well help you catch the assassin, but it would come at the cost of driving Equestria to the ground. Equestria will survive longer than Luna will, Shining answered. Rather than a shout, Blueblood's response was to shake his head degradingly. Really, Captain? How long do you imagine? A day? 2. Do you know anything of economics? How many bits do you think will travel between Equestria's domains in a full day? I don't see why that matters, Blueblood, Shining answered. I'm interested in saving lives, not counting bits. Fine, I'll spell it out. The unicorn's prideful tone was borne by a smug, superior smile. Inter-district trade accounts for 300 million bits every 24 hours. That means Catalog goes bankrupt in a day and a half. After that, it's the commoners like you who start paying. Jobs disappear. Families go hungry. And you know what, Commander? We get riots. Ponies die. That's the cost of what you and Auntie are understanding. Do you understand? Or do I need to use more common words? This meeting will come to order! Powderwig seemed near to passing out from the force he put into his words. Plates Blue Blood, Captain Armor, I must ask that you return to your seats for the time being. His desires were granted with only the slightest modicum of acceptance, but they were granted nonetheless. Good. Now, Princess, well, I understand the concern for your sister. I fear that she is but one pony out of many within Equestria. My fellows, do you have anything to add for Her Majesty? I do. Ormo Hotstone, the half zebra, straightened up in her chair and spoke. Princess Celestia, your plan is folly. Her tone picked up in musical quality. Unless of her location you have proof. The two birds are in the bush are but one, not one in a hoof. Don't spout your zebra nonsense here, Hotstone. Savanzo added derided with a snort of distaste and utter obliviousness to her own hypocrisy. Use common equestrian like the rest of us. I think you're missing her point, Prince. Silverline, the Cloudsdale representative, turned toward Shining Armor, speaking under his bushy mustache. Captain, do you know what the assassin is? If so, we could close that jurisdiction without harming any of the others. We have leads, but no definite location. Of course he doesn't. Justice Warden, the blood-colored unicorn mare beside Powdered Wig, lowered her nose to overlook her behind the half-moon glasses and glare at Armor. Canterlot has nearly been conquered 3 times under this pony's watch, and frankly, the Royal Guard is an embarrassment. Her head swiveled from left to right in an instant, ending with her nose pointing at the princess. If you had only made me aware of this disaster a handful of days ago, I could have gathered some of my rangers, and we could have solved this disaster by now. I propose we find a replacement. Do not deride Captain Armor so quickly, Duchess. Shining Armor was surprised to hear Stefando's voice coming to his defense. You may be forgetting, but he was able to stop the Queen and the Changelings, when she had even defeated our princess. The battalion ruler looked down at the table at his son-in-law, smiling. On another day, Shining might have derided his hypocrisy after the earlier discussions of his rule, but he wasn't in opposition to help. Thanks in no small part to your daughter, Red Warden added, faking fatigue with her words. We know, Prince. We've heard all about their infamous wedding. This doesn't excuse the fact that he was unable to prevent the attack in the first place. It also fails to address our real issue, which is how a measure as desperate as closing our borders could in any way assist us. My thought, Celestia answered, with a surprisingly harsh tone, was that isolating Masquerade would allow my guard to catch up with her and prevent her from leaving Equestria. I admit, the plan is an act of desperation. That's exactly the problem I am facing at the moment. However, I am desperate. If any of you have a better plan, please let us hear it. The silence that followed was short, taken by a prim and proper unicorn saying to Celestia's left. I am afraid that none of us are military advisors, Your Majesty, save the pony to your right. Tell us, watchful eye, what would you have done? The Tsar answered by closing his eyes and lowering his head. You misunderstand the history of my home. I am not a soldier, nor does my mind follow the tactics. I was only the voice of a revolution. My sons are words planners and soldiers. They are here, if you wish to speak to them, but I fear we are spending our time poorly. Silver Lining turned his head to the side in a mix of confusion and mistrust. Are you saying that to help Princess Luna is a waste of time? I am saying that worrying over Princess Luna is a waste of our time. Let younger ponies bear that burden. Our duty is to give them what they need. to watch over them should they fail. That is what we must concern ourselves with. Shining felt his drive for the hunt rise with every word that left the Tsar's mouth. I'm not going to fail. The Alicorn broke his focus on Celestia and turned towards Shining with a fatal focus. I have no intention of telling you otherwise, Shining Armor, but unless your magic has shown you the future, and her guaranteed health beyond the shadow of any doubt, we must be prepared. Can you do this? You, of all ponies, know that reading the future is forbidden, Miss Watchful Eye. Prince Bluebeard's derisive coercion was accompanied by a wave of his hoof. Silver Lining, the Pegasus of the group, took on a confused expression, but it was the half-zebra who raised the obvious question. Why would that magic be forbidden? It would certainly help out of Equestria. A half-dozen's mouths were open to answer, but Celestia cut them all off simply by settling her gilded hoofs gently on the table. The future has many possibilities, and until choices are made, all are possible. That is why magic cannot bring a cutie mark before its time. A foal's special talent could be many things until it's realized. The princess then turned her gaze to the room's windows, as he wistfully observed the horizon. Looking into the future takes away these choices. What is seen, even if it's terrible and dark, will always come to pass. Choice is stolen away, and free will no longer exists. She pulled in a long and dreary breath before finishing her thoughts. Such magic kept my sister away from me for a millennia, when I have ought to have lost her only for a day. I will not gamble with her life again. Shining Armor was shocked beyond words, as his mind was drawn to his sister. He could clearly remember when Twilight had shown him a simple, dusty greenish-gray book called Predictions and Prophecies. Its meaning took on a new light in his mind. His reflections were shattered when Red Warden's nasally tone again broke the silence of the room. I suppose I have some pony had to bring up this sort of topic. I shall do it. Princess Celestia, if the worst were to come to pass, what would you have us do? Celestia stared blankly forward. Shining Armor was left in the uncomfortable position of sitting across the length of the table from her, and couldn't tell whether her eyes were fixed on him or seeing somewhere else entirely. If it happens, you must tell your ponies the truth and guard your borders. Her face slowly drifted in the direction of Oromoro Heartstone, who seemed to be just as unsettled by the princess's attention. Worst, Celestia's tone picked up a hint of intensity as he spoke to the guardian Zabrika. Magnus has been my associate for years, but it's the way of the Griffins to strike when others are weak. You would need to be aware of them. Do we need to be worried about war? Silver Lining asked, clearly sickened by the thought. After what the dragons did, Celestia's gaze snapped to him with sudden focus. Her tone built in strength. Lord Kren will not cross me, Silver Lining. After what happened a decade ago, of all of my peers, he I would trust the most. Nevertheless, watchful eye, I would expect you to be mindful of his subjects. Shar nodded in silence as Celestia moved her focus to Duchess Warden. You, Red Warden, have the most to fear. Both the Boars and the Changelings would come across your lands, and both have reason to attack us while we are weak. Should I lose my sister, I will lend you the Royal Guard. Yes, Princess. Good. Celestia's head swept her trembled pony slowly. Is this what you wanted from me? A promise that I would not forget Equestria as I mourned Luna? Or are you wondering about something else entirely? No pony was willing to speak up to the obvious hint. It took a long time for words to again enter the room, and when they did, it was with interpretation that Shining Armor would never expect from his boisterous tongue of his father-in-law. Saranzo leaned forward slowly and stiffly. Princess, there is one more matter. You want Luna's power. Celestia almost spat the words, and her nose wrinkled as if a foul odor came to her attention. I know you aren't the only one here, Saranzo. Say it. Go on. No pony answered, fearing the chance that Celestia might find reason to hate them for the words she chose next. When the princess found that her prompt was met with silence, she turned her attention to Powder Wing. Her face lost hints of anger. To Shining Armor, it was as if she had put on a mask, one which she wore so often that most
Ponies would mistake it for her face. She had the tiniest hint of a soft smile, but her face had largely selected wisdom and serenity. It lacked any sort of anger, but Shiny couldn't imagine the feeling had been buried far beneath her surface. Lord Chancellor, would you like to be known as the immortal Prince Wig? The heavy pony's rolls of fat quivered under Celestia's seemingly friendly focus.
Well, Princess, that is, if you ought to offer it to me.
I see. The words were a simple statement of fact, rather than the condemnation of some of the ponies present were no doubt expecting. What of you, Duchess Warren? How do you feel about the night? Unlike Power Wig, Red Warren had too much pride to quiver in fear before her almighty ruler. She closed her eyes to straighten herself up. It would be the greatest honor I would ever receive, Princess. Yes, it would. Celestia said nothing more than simple words, turning her eyes toward Silver Lining. What of you, Counselor? The old Pegasus' words were stolen away by the stallion to his left.
Auntie, surely you must be joking. He isn't even a noble or a unicorn, let alone an alicorn.
And yet he has more magic than you, nephew. He would raise the moon just as well as I do, if he had to. Tell me, Silver Lining, would you take Luna's place? The Pegasus was the first of the group to slowly shake his head from side to side.
I would not, Princess.
Interesting. Celestia turned her head to Prince Blueblood and spoke before he could even open his mouth. You don't need to answer, nephew. I know full well that you would seize that power in an instant. Shining Armor readied his tongue, but found himself eternally grateful when the ruler of the sun passed over him, turning to Oromo Heartstone. The House-Seeker spoke up without being asked. Such power would bring respect to my land, though at the cost of the princess I dare not demand. Whenever Celestia had thought of the zebra's words, her face offered no more explanation than it had to the other nobles. Her head swerved further to the Prince of Pitali. It too, Saranzo? The ageless alicorn wondered.
Not for myself, no. I think the gift should belong to my daughter, Cadenza.
Celestia nodded slowly, then turned back across the table to Shining Armor. What do you say to this? Shining's blood ran cold for a moment, as the fearful ponies in the room turned their eyes to him. His mouth was dry when he opened it, and he sucked in bitter breath before he spoke. No, Princess.
What? Shining Armor?
The prince's tone sounded betrayed, but Shining Armor cut him off. Servanzo, I don't want Cadence to have her watch me get old and die. I don't want to leave her alone forever. The words were followed by silent contemplation, until at last the battalion prince fell back against his chair, shaking his head slowly. Celestia turned to the last pony, Watchful Eye, who met her gaze with a solemn face.
My words will be the same as Shining Armor's, Princess. I would have my sons bury me. I will not bury another of my sons.
Celestia turned back to the group as a whole. Do you understand why I cannot let Luna go? Any pony could raise the moon. That isn't why I need her. I need my sister because she is the only pony who could ever be there for me without it hurting. If I had to choose another, it would be Twilight Sparkle. She would never fill that part of my heart I hold for Luna, but her company would keep me well in the ages to come. The princess turned to Shining Armor. Her mask showed a crack, as the hints of a tear built near the corner of her eyes. The water never fell, but the gentle sparkling it gave in the faint light was unmistakable. I could never do that to my student, though. I could never take away her friends like that and force her to live on as they passed away. And so, if I lose my sister, I will be alone. Forever. Celestia then stepped up out of her throne, head held low. This meeting is over. Travel home safely and be thankful for your mortality. As she left the room, Shining Armor couldn't help but hear the soft tap of a single raindrop hitting the stone of a palace.
Good. Now duck. Good.
Jack Renegades' breath was stolen from his body as a well-toned wing struck him in the throat. He shook his head head, bringing focus back to his remaining eye, and smiled.
You weren't kidding about being fast, kid. You got some good magic in you.
Rainbow just adjusted her pith helmet and smiled wide. Fastest flyer in Equestria, and only pony to ever make a sonic ray boom right here. What's magic got to do with it? I'm not a unicorn. The jungle pony took a step back from the little field of their battle. His focus turned briefly to the small pond whose shores became their camp. Ultimately, his hose carried him to a tall, lanky tree whose roots were covered by a pair of saddlebags. From his own bags, he grabbed a pair of flat crackers. One was thrown Rainbow's way, accompanied by a wise smile.
Correct, didn't teach you any of that?
Sorry, I went Corey there. Crack didn't teach me anything, Dead Reckoning. He just kept telling me not to use my wings, like I was an earth pony or something. Don't know who put the sticks so far up it.
That's enough, kid. I get you don't get along with him, but there's no need to be mad about it. He's a good pony if you get to know him. He's got his reasons. Also, you don't need to call me Dead Reckoning. Just Reckoning is fine, or Deadeye, if you like that better. Just don't call me Dead.
The comment was enough to earn a laugh from Rainbow, who then shouted out the names in her head before answer. Alright, Deadeye, if that's what you want. Just don't get to call me Kid all the time.
Deal. Now, as I was saying, right, magic. So all ponies have magic, not just unicorns.
Yeah, I know. Pegasi used magic to fly and walk on clouds. We all have that, though. Rainbow shrugged. I don't see the big deal.
Well, that's because you just don't understand how it works.
He paced over to the tiny pond whose bank had become their camp, and dug the tips of his wings into the water.
How hot do you think it is right now, Dash?
Rainbow looked back to her wings, and the passes of damp sweat that were building on the tan shirt beneath them. The sheer scorching sun that broke through the canopy was bad enough, but the humidity was the worst. They brought to Rainbow's mind much more potent words. The wet heat sat to her energy, slowed her every step. It's pretty hot! Dead Reckoning turned, and flicked his wings at a tree a few feet away. Rainbow was left with her mouth hanging wide open as the droplets of water that threw from his fingers did not splash down on the branches. Instead, they clung to the bark in the form of tiny icicles.
Fancy a cool drink?
How did... Rainbow couldn't even finish the words.
It's just a magic trick. It's not very useful, but it's pretty easy. I bet you can do it. Go, stick your wing in the wire.
Rainbow couldn't wait. She flew the short distance to the wire's edge and dipped her wings. Okay, now what?
Now, you think of something sad.
At first, Rainbow questioned the order. She had to remind herself that it was magic, and it didn't always make sense. Nearly half the things Twilight did were way crazier than what she had been asked. She called into her imagination the ending to Derry Do in the Cove of Candles, where Derry's closest friend, Dodger, gave his life to save the mayor. It was an easy thing to imagine, and it even made Rainbow sniffle a bit. She focused on the picture her mind had made, recording every minute detail, and slowly the tips of her wings began to feel numb with cold. She opened her eyes and thrust her wings forward. Ha! Dead Reckoning maintained a surprisingly straight face as a decent-sized splash of water ruined the short mess he called a mane.
I don't think you got the feeling right.
Well, why should it matter anyway?
That's how Pegasus magic works, Das. It's based on how you feel. It's why it's called empatha. Like, what do you usually think about when you pull off a sonic rainbow?
Rainbow shrugged. Well, I don't know. Pretty much anything, I guess. I sort of could do it whenever. Dead Reckoning seemed depressed as he nodded.
When you did it for the first time, how did you feel? What made you want to try?
Well, I guess I felt like I needed to show up that stupid cult and win. Rainbow's voice trickled off as a realization reached her. Then the next time I was able to do it, it was to save my friend Rarity.
The scout pony broke into a massive smile. Exactly. You were able to do that magic because you felt like you needed to. Desperation was the key, until your magic got used to it. Making ice is the same, only instead of desire, it works off sadness. The young mare gave a slow nod of understanding and closed her eyes to focus. Her mind was quickly brought back to fiction. Not to fiction, but to memories.
Memories of her childhood and a long hospital hallway, and a cold, friendly Pegasus. Papa was talking to a Dr. Pony. His name was Dr. Chart, and I didn't like him very much. He kept telling me that Mommy needed to sleep, or that she had to take her medicine. The medicine always made her sleepy, and she never wanted to play or even hear about flight camp. Papa usually brought me to the hospital, but today he hadn't even been there when school got out. I was a pretty good flyer though, and I knew the way to the hospital by memory. Dr. Shot and Papa were talking in the big words. I didn't know most of them, but I imagined Papa was going to be building a new part of the hospital soon. That was usually what he talked about when he used big words. All the grown-up ponies wanted him to give him his clouds, which confused me, since there were clouds everywhere, and that any pony could go grab them if they needed more. All the thought I put into their talk was unimportant. When my little host finally brought me to the tall white door to Mom's room, the number on the front door said 424D, though the little box with Mom's name was gone. I pushed open the door, and it started to swing open. I then felt a strong leg wrap around my middle, pulling me away. I felt a warm coat against my back, and a big bushy bunch of hair pressed against my ears. I knew it was Papa when I felt the way his fuzzy face tickled me. Not today, my sunshine. We could talk later, Dr. Chart said before turning away to walk down that hall.
Dad, why can't I see Mommy?
Because, sweetheart. The words made me sad. I wriggled in Dad's grip, and his hold wasn't tight enough to keep me still. My little host hit the ground, and right away I started beating my wings. Dad usually let me win races, but this time he wasn't fast enough to catch me at all. I pressed my hooves against the door, darting inside. The room was empty. Mom's bed was made, clean and tight, but Mom wasn't in it. All the paper, the machines, and the bags of funny-colored rainbow water were gone.
Where's Mommy?
I shouted when Papa came into the door. Dad didn't say anything, but when he saw me, his face crinkled up, and I could see that his eyes were getting wet. I was afraid that shouting had hurt his feelings. I ran up and wrapped my legs around his.
I'm sorry, Papa. I didn't mean to yell. I just want to be where Mommy is.
Mommy's gone, Dad told me, as his face tickled my ears. Mommy's gone to be with Daddy. Come in, Shining Armor. The princess's words were accompanied by the doors to her chamber swinging open wide from within. When his eyes took in the ruler, he was surprised to see hints of life and color returning to her mane. It was still primarily pink, but subtle hints of green and blue had filled the edges, and every few moments it would quiver in the unseen breeze. You look good, princess. She shook her head, not even bothering to meet his gaze. Her focus was on the sun setting outside her window. He noticed her horn was glowing with magic to bring about the event. I have been told that every day for at least 1,000 years, Captain. It's just my magic beginning to return. Thank you for noticing, though. I found something in our investigation. Celestia turned away from her son in an instant, and eyes narrowed into focused points. Something to help Luna? He didn't even seem to answer her for her hope. The reality was written as plain as day across his face to see. No, Princess. I'm afraid it's bad news. One of my lieutenants, marked down, was killed this morning. Celestia bowed her head with practiced grace. I am sorry to hear that. What was he investigating? Here, Princess. Canterlot. Her eyes grow ever so wider at the revelation. In my office. A guard's pony killed him? I suspect so, yes. He knew, or at least thought, some pony was following him. He wanted to get this letter to me before he went into hiding. Whoever killed him must have taken the first page. But I found a second in my office. He unfolded the letter and levitated to her. As her eyes scanned the words with incredible speed, his explanation passed on. I needed to talk to you about this traitor. First off, could it be one of the night guard? I don't know much about... Celestia's face became frighteningly cross. The little hint of a smile she usually wore was completely gone. No, Captain. Are you sure, Princess? I know they might seem trustworthy. I think you might not understand. This is not a question of loyalty. Those creatures are incapable of betraying my sister. I would rather not speak of them. Shining Armor was stunned by Celestia's words. It took him far too much time to put aside his surprise at the bluntness of her speech. It took him a false start to finally begin speaking again. I understand, Princess. The betrayer isn't from them, though it means they're in the honor guard. Celestia nodded. At least, that is what Mark Down is suggesting. Do you have anything to add? Shining took a deep breath, preparing himself for what he was to do. Yes, Princess. Shoulder on. She was the one to inform me of Mark's death, rather than one of my guard. I understand she is also acting as captain of the honor guard, after the commander's death. Celestia nodded. I'm tentative to declare her guilty without more solid proof, however. Still trusted her completely. It took the experienced guard's pony barely a moment to make the connection between the name and the title of the commander. With all due respect, Princess, the commander is dead because of the ponies he trusted. The words seemed to wound Celestia. She looked away from Shining, focusing on the setting sun. He was prepared to apologize, but her words bested his speed. Yes, Captain, he is. She would also seem to be the logical choice, with regard to your lieutenant's comment on the Blizzard Revolution. That's actually the first I've ever heard of it. What happened? Celestia's horn ignited, setting the sun continued. Its momentary pause had likely gone unnoticed across the world. The Blizzard Revolution was unfortunately brief war in Stalingrad, going on 6 years ago. Watchful Eye overthrew Baron Frostbite. You may recall the Tsar's reaction to the title of Baron a few hours ago. I see. Shining Armor nodded. Soldier Allen fought in the revolution? She fought for the Baron, by my understanding, Celestia observed as he pushed the sun below the horizon. After he was overthrown, Steel brought her back, rather than let her die fighting a war that was already over. Shining Armor was shocked. He recorded a war criminal for your personal guard? With all due respect, Princess, why did you just let her join? I trusted Steel's judgment, Captain. She turned away from the night sky behind her, and offered a mournful gaze at Shining Armor. Perhaps that was a mistake. She took on her most serious expression, one Shining recognized from her fateful duel with the Queen of the Changelings. I will deal with Soldier On, Captain. You are to pursue Mark Down's killer. The trail may lead you to Masquerade. Shining Armor bowed in acknowledgement of his orders, then stepped out of his ruler's room, ready to face his unknown foe. Dead Reckoning had to dodge out of the way when a trio of icicles flew towards his head. Reflexes built over 3 decades in the field were more than enough to pull him out of the way with ease, leaving the flying spears to shatter against a tree at the edge of their clearing. The broken shards of ice left dancing glimmers of purple, pink, and orange in the fading light of the sunset. It didn't take Dead Reckoning long to gain an encouraging clap. I'm impressed, Ass. You learn fast. He looked at the shards of her ice, melting in the dirt floor in the jungle, and compared them to his own effect. She certainly hadn't made quite as much of the frozen wire, but her contribution was still amazing, especially given the difference in their experience. He turned toward the filly standing in the wings in her lake. His jaw dropped. She shook her head, burying whatever painful memory had given her the ice she used, and looked up at the efforts of her magic. I didn't do nearly as good as you, though, she said, disappointed. Clearly, she hadn't noticed her other effect. Maybe you don't have much control. Reckoning's wing pointed to the water at Rainbow's hooves. But you do have a lot more raw power. I'm sorry, by the way. Sorry for what? Rainbow looked down. Dead Reckoning couldn't help but laugh at her reaction. Nearly half the pond was covered in a sheet of thin ice. In the perfect mirror, she gave herself a little smile and adjusted her ill-fitting pith helmet. She must have thought she looked cool. It wasn't often Dead Reckoning got to react with younger ponies, and the immaturity of it all warmed his heart. As he finally broke away from her own image, he remembered her question. Like I said, our magic is based on emotion. So I'm sorry, because of whatever it was you thought of, it must have been really terrible. Yet again, she obviously felt the need to be tough. It's nothing. He obviously couldn't see inside her mind, but the ice on the pond was more than enough to make it clear how much her memory hurt. He didn't feel up to pressing the issue, though.
If you say so. Now come over here and sit down. I can explain a few more things.
His leg patted a spot beside their legacy constructed fire pit before he folded his legs and took a seat himself. Oh, but I wanted to try that again! The one-eyed pony shook his head.
Don't waste your time. Ice isn't any good in this fight.
He could recall the times when ponies had tried. Most of them ended up dead. I disagree, Dead Reckoning. Have you ever seen how Sub-Zero fights?
You'll never make enough to actually freeze some pony.
Okay, I stand corrected. Well, maybe I want to be able to do something besides just hurt other ponies. The words were surprisingly scolding, and Reckoning had to stop and remind himself that not every pony viewed his life through his eye. Said eye wandered lazily toward the ground, as he reflected on just how amazing the little filly in front of him had wound up in the Subriken jungle. He felt the fairest thing to do was not to mention it, and that left only his option in the form of a lazy idiom that he had heard too many times in his own youth.
When you're honor guard, it's easy to forget about things like that.
It hadn't originally been about the honor guard, but she didn't need to know about that. Once upon a time, wars hadn't been from fairy tales. Reckoning was caught off completely on guard by her response. So, you don't have a family or something? At least some friends? What do you do with your time off? He really only spoke to the Griffins or in Marathon anymore, and neither of them were delusional enough to ask a question like that. It was so ridiculous that it brought out a laugh, but not the sort he usually gave. He knew almost instantly that the barking, hollow noise he made was the laugh of an old, dying guard who didn't actually think something was funny. He didn't have much in the way to fix the noise, though, so it settled for explaining himself.
I haven't taken the time off in 6 years, Rainbow Dash. And no, I don't have a family.
It wasn't quite true. Somewhere back in Equestria, he had a brother, along with at least a half-dozen nieces and nephews. Of course, none of them would welcome a visit from crazy Uncle Dana.
The rest of the honor guard are the only ponies I really call friends.
He hadn't meant to sound so sad, but he saw pity in Rainbow's eyes. It made him mad.
That's how the honor guard works. We give up everything for Celestia. No pony else matters. No family, no friends. Just duty. I'm damn proud of that.
He closed his good eye, so that way his only scarred right orb was watching her. It only struck him as strange that he would never know what that eye looked like, from some pony else's point of view. Regardless, the Griffin talents had taken out most of his eyelids, so closing the thing properly was generally an exercise in futility.
Don't you feel sorry for me? I chose the broken guard. That's what I do. Anyway, we were talking about magic, right?
He had hoped to lighten the spirits after the grim talk, but Rainbow seemed frightened by the sudden shift in his demeanor. Yeah, ice magic.
Right.
He nodded firmly once.
Don't waste your time. You've got to figure out what sort of magic works best for you. Sort of like a cutie mark. It's based on what you lack, or who you are.
So, what kinds of magic are there? Can I see the future? Teleport? They were questions every pony asked when they learned about Pegasus magic. In his lifetime, he answered them a dozen times.
No, you can't. That's unicorn magic, or as it's supposed to be called, arcana. We don't change the way the world works. We bend what's already there to our advantage. That means things like ice and thunder, but it also means animal instincts for the stare.
What about earth ponies?
That's the funny one. See, unicorns can do magic. Pegasi make magic, but earth ponies are magic. It's called Endura. The sort of things are always there, always on, I guess you say. Some earth ponies can make things grow.
What, like overnight? I bet Applejack would love it. He didn't know who Applejack was, but given her name, it was hard to guess. Every pony knew some pony from the Apple family.
No, I ain't faster. When an earth pony has that sort of magic, takes care of a plant, it grows bigger, stronger, and healthier. You get more fruit or bigger flowers, or whatever it is you're growing. That's why you don't see any unicorns or Pegasi with farms. We can't compete.
I guess that makes sense, Rainbow nodded. What else?
Well, some earth ponies are just really strong, like Soldier On. I've seen her buck through a solid stone wall before. That's pretty common, actually. They sometimes have other weird little things, too. Lieutenant!
His words stopped, as he remembered the explanation Marathon had given him of recent events. Whatever he said, he still had a hard time believing that the commander was gone.
Sir, Captain On has this sort of danger sense that I've never seen in any pony else. It's really kind of weird. But she almost never gets hit by any pony who's attacking her, because she knows exactly where everything is coming from.
What, like Pinky Sense? Dead Reckoning couldn't resist a sarcastic response.
Well, that depends on what the hey Pinky Sense is, apart from the dumbest name I've ever heard.
Rainbow opened her mouth to explain, but something stopped her. If Reckoning would hazard a guess, he would have said that she decided the effort of explaining wasn't worth it. It's nothing!
If you say so. Now back to Pegasi. I figured we could try teach you one more trick before you get to sleep. I figure you could probably learn a thunderclap or smokescreen pretty easy.
It didn't take long for Rainbow to decide. Thunderclap! Definitely! Reckoning nodded. He had expected the answer, though he didn't bother clarifying that it was because of the trace she shared with Thundercrack. So he probably would have reacted poorly.
That's so. Alright. You do this with your back legs. Try and think of something exciting that gets your blood pumping.
He stood up, flexed his own hind legs, balancing his wings.
Anger works too, but it's usually pretty hard to get angry on purpose.
Rainbow followed his motions, then closed her eyes. Reckoning just waited as her imagination conjured whatever exciting thing, or pony his crack prefer, would get her blood pumping. Then the world exploded in light and sound. His chest burned in agony, and everything went bright white. His eyes opened slowly. The world was still fuzzy at the edges. The first thing he saw was the grass and his hooves. The right one was bleeding, heavily in 2 places. Blood was staining his fur, and the grass beneath it. The air smelled like ozone, from the lightning that probably was still flying everywhere. His eyes were ringing, and all he could hear was a high-pitched constant squeal. Some pony pulled him to his hooves. Or maybe it was his wings. It was hard to tell. Everything was sore. He pulled up his head and looked around. He had fallen in a hole, probably torn up by the unicorn fireball. The low divot that had probably saved his life, keeping him out of view of the enemy. It took a hard, painful stretch for him to press up to the side and peek over the top. They were getting closer. At least 6 big ones. 3 had weapons. One was obviously a mace of some kind, and the last 2 were the kind that killed with their claws and talons and beaks, like animals. The ringing had just barely started to fade when he heard a clear voice behind him in the crater.
Dead Reckoning! You need to get airborne now!
He spun around, swinging a wing blade in a wide arc. The mare behind him jumped back in shock. "Watch it, Sergeant!"
Shut the hell, Captain!
He hissed.
We got 6 of them coming this way! I can't outfly that, not out in the open!
Unending Vigil was utterly serious when she answered him. "I don't expect you to, Sergeant. Just get them up in the air. Flying Squad will take them down!" It was a suicide mission for any pony else, but that's why she called on Dead Reckoning. He flexed his wings and nodded.
Are they ready?
"Do it!" He shot off into the foggy blue. It barely took 2 seconds for the first bolt of lightning to soar over his shoulder. He rolled to the side, wings pulled in, then dropped into a dive. The Pegasus was going far too fast. He made nearly a half-mile into the sky when he finally saw them following. The Griffin's wings were faster, less agile. The latter made little difference in the open sky, but the savannah of northern Sabrica had few trees or obstacles as an alternative. The unicorns in hiding below surged up as one. The sky filled with bursts of light. The griffins dropped one after another. It was probably wrong, but he smiled as he watched them fall. Better than ponies. A sharp pain in his left wing cut off his pleasure. He smirked back to see the last griffin clutching his wing. They were falling together. None of the unicorns were shooting. It took him a moment of agonizing pain and freefall to realize why. It was using him as cover.
Shoot! 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 Damn it!
His words were lost in the wind, but he heard the griffins laugh. Not today, pony! Its wings flared out a mere dozen feet from the ground. The collision stole the air from his lungs and cracked two of his ribs. He couldn't get up. The monster stood over him, pulled back a wickedly sharp talon. His focus was on his face, on his right eye. That's wrong. I lost my left eye. The claw swung forward. It stopped as the Pegasus mare delivered a crushing buck to the monster's face. It recoiled in fear and pain, but she wasn't done. A rear host bucked out again, with the sound of a thundering cannon. The creature fled into the sky. A single burst of magic claimed its life. The mare who saved his life turned back with a mix of anger and confusion. Easy breeze? That's ridiculous. She was never a soldier. She lived in Cloudsdale. The friendly mare grabbed him by both shoulders and looked straight into his eyes. What's gotten into you, Reckoning? And how do you know my mom? Your mom was an easy breeze, too? I didn't know that. Reckoning waved off his strange comment and smiled at the beautiful mare standing before him. Well, you saved my life there. I didn't know you could make a thunderclap. What are you talking about? You taught me that like 10 minutes ago. There was no slow fading, no easy transition. He simply blinked and it was gone. The planes, the royal guard, the dead griffins, the fire, thunder, all disappeared. In their place were the trees and brush of the deep jungle, and the mare standing in front of him was Rainbow Dash, clad in her silly helmet and slightly torn safari shirt. She looked angry. What the hey is wrong with you, Reckoning? I did the thunderclap, then you totally freaked me out. He blinked one eye that could and shook his head vigorously. You sent me back, Rainbow. What? She snapped. It's not your fault. How far is camp? He held for his non-answer to get her to drop it. It didn't take much to realize it was a stupid hope. You only flew 100 feet. He turned, only for Rainbow to angrily grab his shoulder. This way. But that doesn't answer anything. I need an answer. Reckoning sighed. I have a flashback. And what is that supposed to mean? He hated explaining. Your thunderclap made me think it was Celestia, I don't know. 30 years ago? Maybe 39 now. Anyway, the Griffins went to war with us. I thought I was there. So you just went crazy? Rainbow's anger was blurred with concern. Do you do that a whole lot? He stopped walking and nodded. Maybe once a week. Usually, if something catches me off guard. Look, we could talk about it back at camp. I need to think. Rainbow's reaction was a throaty growl, but even with her hunt soldiers, her disappointed tone, she gave the stallion his precious privacy. He spent the next dozen steps whistling the walk Quentin down. Only one realization came to him as he paced across the jungle, and that was a very old burn on the center of his chest was very hot. When he reached the camp, he sat down a fair few inches from the fire and bluntly ignored the heat. His hooves and wings wildly began unbuttoning his shirt as he waited for the questions to begin. Rainbow, ever eager to live up to her speed-related titles, didn't waste any time in picking up. You're telling me that you have flashbacks to a war from 40 years ago? No, not just that, no. The Dragon War, Prison Revolution, maybe a dozen more. He kept his voice as bland as possible, in an attempt to control himself. Rainbow nodded very slowly. Right. And these flashbacks happen all the time? Maybe once a week, like I said. He was aware that a grating tone had entered his voice, but he neither bothered to change it, nor cared. And you just thought not saying anything would be fine and dandy? The fairly sarcastic tone sent him over the edge. Listen, Rainbow Dash, I didn't ask to be like this. I spent my entire life making it so Equestria could be a safe, happy place for ponies like you who don't even know I exist, alright? Some time ago, something got inside me, decided I couldn't take it anymore, and I snapped, okay? Rainbow's mouth hung slightly open as the bigger, older pony paced around and thrust a hoof against her chest, pressing her towards the ground. He wasn't about to take her interruptions or sarcasm. I thought it was so over. I thought so much for a special talent as a scout when the guard will take you. but it turns out there was a pony who understood what was up with me. The commander found out about me, and he let me join up with the broken guard, just like that. I was with all the other freaks, keeping our own little secrets, and everything was fine and dandy, until one day I blew that chance too. I had a flashback in front of Celestia, and I hit her in the face. So now I'm out here in the middle of nowhere, wasting my life playing border patrol on the Griffins because I'm an embarrassment to everything I ever stood for! He finished his ranting, panting, with his wings flared and his one eye glaring as tightly as it could. You could feel the veins popping in his forehead as his heart struggled to keep up with his fury. Rainbow seemed terrified. It took a great deal too long for Reckoning to realize that the wing blade he had never taken off his right wing pressed close to her throat. In that instant, the anger and the force were gone, replaced by total shame. He stalked back to his side of the fire and curled up to the dirt. I'm sorry you have to put up with me. You deserve better than getting stuck out here. He lay there with his eyes closed and waited for the useful half-sleep that made up his nights to overtake him. It was to his incredible surprise when a warm, gentle wing wrapped around him tightly, and a soft weight pressed against his side. Rainbow's voice was still shaken, and he could hear her keeping herself away from his bladed wing, but she still had the courage to speak up. I can't imagine what it would be like to be told you couldn't use your special talent. He looked over at the mare embracing him and shook his head. You've got guts, Dash, to come sit next to me. I shouldn't have shouted at you. No, you shouldn't have. Rainbow slapped his shoulder with a hoof. But I think a cool enough pony to shake that off. I did warn you. I can't really have expected you to act any differently. What actually happened? Well, when you said a thunderclap, I didn't realize it came with actual lightning. His mind locked onto the words, even though Rainbow kept talking. I think I hit you in the chest. You were out cold for a moment, but when you woke up, you started calling me Captain. Then you just flew off. I followed you, but a hippogriff came after you when you got above the canopy. I used the thunderclap to scare it off. Well, thanks. He put his head down his hooves. Can you take first watch? Sure. She pressed her wing tighter against his side. Just warn me if you got any more crazy or personal things I should know. He didn't think the mistake was funny, but he gave her a laugh for comfort's sake. Not until morning. There's a bag of little black seeds in my saddlebag. Take 2 before you go to sleep. It'll help you train your magic. And one more thing, Dash. Yeah? You're the first pony who had the guts to stay close to me after one of those. Thanks for that. The words she answered were so foreign that they had to have been part of a dream. That's what friends are for. He slept soundly and calmly for the first night in 20 long years. Celestia's quill scribbled widely across her page when a thunderous knock shook the door of her study. Her late-night attempt to focus her thoughts and regain her energy had been interrupted. Her letter to Twilight was ruined and would need to be rewritten. It was no more than a thought. It was put aside. She resolved to scold whichever guard's pony was standing outside the door, before recalling that she sent off Soldier On, the only on-duty honor guard at Canterlot, on the pretense of an anonymous lead on Masquerade. With a sideways glance, her magic opened the door, revealing another alicorn, flanked by a pair of stallions in heavy black cloaks. Watchful eye! This is unexpected. She was careful not to sound entirely pleased. The noble ponies were supposed to have left. What were you doing here at this time of night? Princess. Watchful eye gave a short bow. My sons and I have a matter to speak to you we felt could not be handled in front of the stable. It would be improper. I'm sorry, dear readers, but the moment he mentioned stable, my mind immediately went to Fallout Equestria. Sorry, it's habit forming. It would be improper. He stood to his sons in turn, and then made a small gesture with his forehoof. Both bowed, and the blood-colored Pegasus said something in Stalingradi. Ladies and gentlemen, this fic will make you love Google Translate. The truth was that Celestia's Stalingradi was non-existent, but their use of the draconic alphabet made it easy for her to gather Your Highness from the words. She gave a subtle tilt of her head to beckon them to her hooves, then gestured to the cushions she kept sitting around the room. I would have preferred if you'd speak to me during the day, if possible.
I tried. You are hard to reach in a time of trouble, princess.
His broken equestrian certainly explained the use of his native tongue, though the idea was easy to figure out. Very well. What is it that you want to tell me? Loyalliar took over.
My sons and I have information about the assassin masquerade, and I have a request. Understand that I do not propose a trade. The information is yours, regardless of your response to my request. We have every intention of seeing this assassin brought to justice.
Celestia's response was calm and intimidating and cold in factuality. I do not care about the assassin, Tsar. I care about saving my sister.
Your goals align with ours,
the previously silent unicorn responded. Celestia nodded. I hope you can forgive me for wondering what your motive is for catching this assassin and why you couldn't tell the stable.
In a way, I did. However, it is a personal matter.
Loyalliar informed her.
When you ask of your sister's gift, I mentioned that I had already buried one of my sons.
He paused.
Before we continue, let me offer you my apologies for the way my peers treated you today. Some would do well to remember that Princess Luna still lives.
It is hard for the average pony to hurt my feelings anymore, Loyalliar. And believe me when I said that I expect nothing less from the stable.
I'm glad that you are not offended. As I was saying, 2 years ago, Masquerade stole me from a son, and from my sons, a brother. I know that there are still those who call me an usurper and seek to restore the title of the line of Baron. There are other ponies amongst the stable who feel this way. I believe that these ponies must have hired her. Reddick, explain to her what you have learned.
The Pegasus in the heavy cloak nodded.
I lead the Black Cloaks, our god. I have spent much time with them on hunting Masquerade. She is clever, but I confounded her. She learned from Dragon. Zakagata.
Rennick took a prideful grin.
I killed him.
Celestia tried to not show her repulsion to the obvious glee that he had taken in the fact. I see. Is that all you know?
I have many things, but I don't think I should be telling you, though. Do you have a god better than shining armor to trust?
Celestia opened her mouth, then stopped. Idly, her gaze drifted to the mantel over the door, where an 8-foot gap separated a pair of lifelike statues. Not anymore.
Forgive my brother, your majesty. The unicorn nodded. Come, brother. We shall let father and princess speak in privacy.
Rennick seemed reluctant to obey his brother's direction, but after a nod from the Tsar, he paced slowly to the door and left the unicorn alone. His information could well save Luna's life, Loyalliar. Thank you.
You need not give thanks. Letting my son rest will be thanks enough.
Celestia nodded slowly. She hadn't had much time to speak with the new ruler of Stalingrad, but his refusal of the offer of Luna's power had earned him at least the potential for the princess's respect. You said you had a request?
Yes, princess. One which will help you as well as I. You saw my son Reddick. He is bloodthirsty.
She chose a diplomatic response. Many ponies are driven and proud of their accomplishments.
You and I both know that his pride is unwarranted. The ponies of Stalingrad fear him and his black cloaks, as they did police the Baron before me. He does not yet know anything truly wrong, but I fear it is only a matter of time. If I pass, he may become the very stallion I fought against.
I understand your concern, Loyalliar, but I'm afraid I don't know what you want me to do about it. I can speak to him, if you like, but you are his father.
My proposal is very different, princess. Whatever else my son may be, he is an amazing soldier. His mentor was a mutual friend. The stallion you called the commander. I was saddened to hear of his passing.
Celestia's gaze flared up to the door again, then back to the Tsar. He taught your son?
Reddy learned many things from him, yes. When my son said that he had killed the dragon, he spoke the truth. He is the second pony to have accomplished that feat alone.
His watchful eye mirrored the princess's gesture toward the empty space of the great guard's pony.
My son knows well the ways of war and command, but I would like him to learn restraint and honor, as my friend knew well. Let Reddy serve you as he did. The best of his black cloaks will join him until masquerade is caught. He will save your sister, and your influence will save him.
Celestia's mind pictured the red Pegasus standing behind her in Steel's place, watching over her with a little grin. She could fix that. In exchange, she would get Luna back. There was no question to ask. Agreed.